My name is Cassandra. I'm 32 years old. The dining room shimmered under the warm glow of the chandelier. Silver cutlery polished so bright it reflected my face back at me in fractured, distorted pieces. The Sunday roast filled the air with rosemary and thyme, but the scent only made the silence heavier. Everyone was waiting for something. "Pass the potatoes, Cassandra," my father said, without meeting my eyes. His tone carried the sharpness I'd grown accustomed to, the kind that reminded me I was an afterthought at this table. I slid the dish toward him, careful not to let the porcelain clatter. Across the table, Marcus smirked as if the whole evening were designed for him. At 29, the golden child had just been named the youngest junior partner in his law firm. The news had been repeated 3 times already, once by my mother, twice by Marcus himself, and yet they spoke of it like it was a family achievement, not his alone. "That's wonderful, darling," my mother said, her manicured hand resting lightly on Marcus's arm. "Such a bright future ahead. Imagine the home you'll have, the family you'll raise." Her voice, though gentle, carried the weight of a pointed comparison. I smiled faintly, cutting into my roast beef. "Congratulations," I said softly. Marcus leaned back, lips twitching with pride. "Some people just know how to seize opportunities." The words weren't subtle, but subtlety was never Marcus's strength. He wanted me to react to snap, to prove once again that I was the disappointing daughter who had veered off course. Instead, I sipped my wine. Silence, after all, was my grandmother's greatest lesson. My father set his fork down with deliberate slowness. "Speaking of the future, we need to address the house situation." I felt the muscles in my stomach tighten. So it was finally here. "You've been living there alone for years," my mother said. "Your grandmother wasn't thinking clearly when she left it to you. A young man like Marcus, with his career and prospects, he needs a proper family home." Marcus's smirk sharpened. "You've had your fun, Cass. But it's time someone responsible took over. Someone with a real career." My knife scraped softly against the plate as I set it down. The house was my grandmother's wish. "Wishes," my father said firmly, "are not always practical. We've spoken to the family lawyer. The property should be placed back into the trust where it belongs." He pulled a folded document from his jacket and slid it across the table. My pulse quickened, but outwardly I remained calm. I glanced at the paper but didn't touch it. "And if I don't sign—" Marcus laughed, the sound harsh and triumphant. "Then what? You can barely keep up with groceries. Taxes, maintenance, mortgage. It's all too much for you. Be realistic." If he had looked closer, he might have noticed the flicker in my eyes, the shadow of amusement that almost betrayed me. But Marcus never looked beyond his own reflection. "We're being generous," my mother added, her voice dripping with false sweetness. 3 months to find a new place. Perhaps something modest, an apartment on the east side. "Isn't that where Maria, your cleaning lady, lives?" Her disdain clanged louder than the silver spoons. Maria, who had cleaned our family home for decades, had become more than help. She was my confidant, my first business partner. But to them, she was invisible like me. "The house belongs to me," I said quietly, "legally and morally." My father's jaw tightened, his face darkening. "Then you leave us no choice. Leave your keys. Get out. The lawyers will handle the rest." I looked at him, at the man who had never once believed in me, at my mother, lips pursed in habitual disapproval, at Marcus, glowing with smug victory. Slowly I reached into my purse and pulled out the keys my grandmother had pressed into my hand on her deathbed. "Sometimes silence is the best strategy," she had whispered. I set the keys gently on the table. The soft metallic clink echoed louder than Marcus's laugh. "Thank you for dinner," I said, standing, "and for making this easier than I expected." "Easier," Marcus scoffed. "You're being thrown out." I met his gaze, a faint smile tugging at my lips. "We'll see." I walked toward the door, my heels clicking softly against the polished floor. Behind me, my father's voice thundered, "Don't bother fighting this. You can't afford the legal fees. No bank will back you." I paused at the threshold, the shadows of the chandelier stretching long across the floor. In my office, documents lay waiting. Contracts, deeds, transfers, all lined up like dominoes ready to fall. I turned my head slightly. "Good night." And with that, I left them to their illusions, the echo of my grandmother's wisdom steady in my mind. Because while they plotted to strip me of everything I had already prepared for the storm, they didn't see coming. The night air outside was sharp, carrying the faint scent of wet leaves. I slipped into my car, the silence inside wrapping around me like armor. My fingers hovered over the steering wheel for a moment before I pulled out my phone. One message was all it took. "It's time. Execute tomorrow morning." I pressed send. My lawyer would know exactly what that meant. Months of preparation, every signature, every transfer, every document, they were all in place. As I drove back, the city lights flickered past, but my mind was elsewhere on my grandmother's face as she had whispered her last words to me, her frail hand pressing the keys into my palm. Don't fight noise with noise. Let them think you're weak until silence becomes your weapon. By the time I pulled into my driveway, calm had returned. My house stood tall against the night sky, its windows glowing warmly. I stepped inside and Maria was there, as always, waiting with her quiet, knowing smile. They pushed you, didn't they? She asked softly, handing me a cup of tea. They think it's over, I replied. Tomorrow they'll learn the truth. The next morning, sunlight poured through the tall windows of my office. The antique grandfather clock ticked steadily, its pendulum slicing the silence into measured beats. Each tick drew me closer to 900 a.m. On my desk folders lay open deeds, transfer notices, acquisition contracts. 6 years of work distilled into paper and ink. My laptop screen glowed with my portfolio dashboard, 12 properties spread across 3 states, each one a carefully chosen step in my climb. 8:57, I murmured, glancing at the clock. My phone buzzed. A message from Maria. They just arrived. Your father, your mother, Marcus. They look furious. I sipped my tea, the steam curling upward like smoke from a battlefield not yet begun. At 900 sharp. The doorbell rang. It was followed by pounding fist, my father's voice booming through the door. Cassandra, open this door immediately. I pressed the intercom. I'm in a meeting. Please wait in the parlor. Maria will let you in. I could almost hear my mother's disdain crackling through the silence being received by the housekeeper, the one they had always dismissed as beneath them. But they had no choice. The parlor was where they would wait. My phone lit up with an incoming call. Robert Chen, Senior Vice President at Highland Mortgage Corporation. Everything is proceeding as planned, Robert said smoothly. I just spoke with your father. He didn't take the news well. I allowed myself a faint smile. Thank you, Robert. I'll handle the rest. As the call ended, I heard footsteps outside my office door, angry, impatient. My father's voice, again closer now. We demand answers. Right now. The clock chimed, once its bell echoing through the room. I closed the folder in front of me, rose from my chair, and turned toward the door. They thought they had cornered me, but what they didn't know was that every move they'd made had already been accounted for. The trap they thought they'd sprung was the one I had set for them all along. And now it was time to open the door. The door swung open and my father stormed in first. His face was flushed. His fists clenched the veins in his neck, straining against his shirt collar. My mother followed, clutching her handbag so tightly her knuckles whitened. Marcus trailed behind, smirk-gone eyes, darting with nervous calculation. What is the meaning of this? My father barked, waving his phone. The mortgage company says you've transferred the loan to some corporation, your corporation. They claim you own this house outright. I remained seated behind my desk, the morning sunlight spilling across the polished wood between us. Calmly, I gestured to the chairs opposite me. Why don't you sit down? This might take a while to explain. My mother refused, standing stiffly as though the leather armchair might bite her. Marcus sank into his body buzzed with restless energy, like a trapped animal. You've deceived us, my father accused, his voice thunderous. No, I said quietly, swiveling my laptop so they could see the glowing portfolio dashboard. Rows of properties lit the screen, blue markers spreading across a city map. I've deceived no one. You simply never bothered to look. Marcus leaned forward, his bravado flickering. These can't all be yours. They are, I replied. 47 properties across 3 states, including this house, including the building where your law firm rents its top-floor office space. The words hit like a crack of thunder. Marcus froze his lips, parting soundlessly. My father's face blanched. That's impossible. How would you even? I started small, I interrupted. 1 foreclosed duplex bought with my savings. I renovated it with Maria's help. Yes, our housekeeper. My eyes flicked to my mother. She's not just an employee. She's my partner. She owns 15% of the company. My mother's lips quivered as though the air had turned to ice. The maid, your partner. Maria saw what none of you did, I said, my voice steady. She walked streets with me on weekends, spotted undervalued neighborhoods, helped me flip that first property. From there we grew, slowly, deliberately, while you laughed at me. I clicked the screen to show the next file acquisition records, renovation plans, sales contracts. Their faces reflected in the glass of the laptop screen looked ghostly, as if they were staring into a future they could not control. You've been struggling, my mother stammered. Working from home, no office, no employees. Those weren't signs of struggle, I corrected. They were strategy. Keeping quiet while I built an empire you never saw coming. The silence that followed was suffocating. My father finally dropped into a chair, his authority cracking like old stone. His hands trembled slightly as he tugged at his tie. You're saying you own everything? Not everything I said, not yet, but enough. I leaned back, folding my hands. The mortgage has been paid off for 3 years. The deeds are in my name. The company valuation is higher than the family trust. And Marcus, I turned my gaze on him, watching his confidence drain away. Your firm's rent payments help fund my acquisitions. He swallowed hard, his face pale. You're my landlord. Yes, I said simply. I've been for over a year. The air was thick with disbelief, betrayal, and a fear they could not mask. For the first time in years, they were the ones speechless. And I, the quiet daughter they dismissed, finally had their undivided attention. Now, I said, closing the laptop with a soft click, let's discuss what comes next. The weight of my words still hung in the room, thick as smoke after a fire. My father leaned forward, elbows on his knees, as if trying to ground himself. My mother sat ramrod straight, lips pressed into a thin line. Marcus stared at me, caught between rage and humiliation. I opened a drawer and pulled out 3 neatly prepared folders. I slid them across the desk, one to each of them. Inside, you'll find new lease agreements, market rate rent, standard terms, all above board. You may continue living in the family properties if you sign. Otherwise, I let the silence finish the sentence. You can't be serious. My mother's voice cracked on the last word. Business is business, I replied evenly. You were prepared to make me homeless, remember? Why should the rules suddenly be different for you? Father's hand came down hard on the desk. We are your family. I met his glare without flinching. And you taught me that family doesn't pay the bills. Deals, contracts, power, those are what matter. I simply learned the lesson better than you expected. Marcus sprang to his feet, pointing at me. You're enjoying this, aren't you? Watching us squirm. This is revenge. No, I said softly. This is balance. My mother shook her head, disbelief clouding her features. We raised. You gave you everything, and this is how you repay us. You raised Marcus, I countered. I was tolerated, reminded at every meal how I'd failed, how I'd disappointed. The only one who believed in me is gone now, and you wanted to erase even her last gift to me. My father snatched his folder and flipped it open, scanning the papers with trembling hands. These agreements, do you think we'll sign them? We'll fight this. We'll drag you through court. I leaned back, steepling my fingers. You could try, but the lawyers you'd need are already on retainer with my company, including the very firm you threatened me with last night. The room went silent. My father's jaw worked, but no sound came. Marcus's hand fell to his side. My mother looked down at the folder as though it might bite her. This is extortion, Marcus muttered. This is protection, I corrected. For me, for my investments, for everything I've built while you weren't watching. You underestimated me, and now you're facing the cost. I rose slowly, deliberately, and walked to the window. The garden stretched beyond where I had once played as a child, under my grandmother's watchful eyes. I remembered her telling me that silence was a blade, sharper than any insult. Tonight, I wielded it. Sign the agreements by Friday, I said without turning back. If not, I'll have no choice but to find new tenants. And Marcus, your firm's competitors have already expressed interest in that top-floor office space. They'd be thrilled to move in. My brother flinched as if I'd struck him. You wouldn't, he whispered. I finally turned my expression calm, my voice steady. Try me. No one spoke after that. The only sound was the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway. The roles had shifted, and we all knew it. For years, I had been the silent daughter in the shadows of their expectations. Tonight, the shadows belonged to me. 1 month later, the city skyline stretched before me from the top floor of the Morrison building. My building. The glass walls reflected the morning sun, casting streaks of gold across polished floors. What had once been whispered plans in the quiet of my grandmother's garden had grown into something undeniable, towering, and real. I stood by the window, coffee in hand, watching people below scurry like ants. For years, I'd walked among them unnoticed. Now, every step I took sent ripples through entire districts. Your 10 o'clock is here, Sarah, my new executive assistant said from the doorway. She was brisk, efficient, everything I needed in this new phase. Send them in, I replied, setting my cup aside. The Henderson Group filed into my office. They had once tried to outbid me on a property. Now they came offering their entire portfolio. Power had a way of changing the direction of every conversation. The meeting was smooth, almost effortless. Their smiles were tight, their offers generous. They no longer saw me as the overlooked daughter of the Williams family. They saw the CEO of a company they could not afford to cross. By the time they left contracts signed, the weight of victory was heavy in my chest. But when the office quieted again, I leaned back in my chair, staring at the skyline, and a different weight pressed down. Success filled the air, but so did something else, silence of a different kind. Loneliness. My phone buzzed, a message from my mother, dinner on Sunday, at your place this time. She'd been calling almost daily, her tone shifting between forced warmth and desperate curiosity. My father had signed the lease papers without a word, retreating into a cold, impenetrable silence. Marcus had been unusually quiet, no taunts, no smug comments, just silence. I rubbed my temple, staring at the message. A month ago, they'd been ready to throw me out. Now they were knocking on my door, asking to sit at my table. Thinking too hard again, Maria's voice floated in as she stepped inside, carrying her ever-present thermos of tea. Always, I admitted, accepting the cup she poured. They've shifted Maria. Mother calls father avoids me, Marcus. He's vanished into silence. And you? She asked gently. I keep moving, I said, because if I stop even for a second, the ghosts of what they tried to do might catch up. Maria sat across from me, her gaze steady. Don't let the empire blind you. You built this for freedom, not chains. Don't replace their control with your own. I looked at her, the woman they had called the maid, the one they dismissed. She was my anchor, the reminder that my empire was not just profit and property, but proof that people like us could rise when no one believed we could. The phone buzzed again. Another message, this one from an unknown number. We need to talk. Marcus. My heart tightened, not from fear, but from curiosity. The silence was about to break. I set the cup down, the steam curling upward like a question mark. Whatever Marcus wanted, it would not be simple, and I was ready for him. At precisely 2:00 p.m., my office door opened and Marcus stepped in. For the first time in years, he didn't look polished. His usually perfect tie was slightly askew, his eyes shadowed his shoulders, carrying a weight that arrogance could no longer disguise. Nice place, he muttered, glancing around the office. His voice lacked its usual edge. Better than the firm's. You're late, I said, keeping my tone neutral. Sit. He obeyed, dropping into the chair across from my desk. His hands fidgeted, a nervous gesture I remembered from childhood when he was caught lying about breaking a vase when he'd cheated at board games. Only this time, there was no parent to defend him. I'll get to the point, he said, clearing his throat. The firm, it's falling apart. Clients pulled out after news of the ownership changes. The partners are making cuts. He exhaled the word, catching in his throat. I'm being let go. I leaned back, studying him. So the golden child has fallen. His jaw tightened, but he didn't rise to the bait. I need to understand how you did it. All of this, right under our noses. I tapped a finger against the desk, thinking of the countless nights spent poring over market reports, walking neighborhoods with Maria, quietly acquiring property after property, while they celebrated Marcus's every small success. I learned from grandmother, I said finally. She taught me patience, to let people underestimate me. While you basked in the spotlight, I built something solid in the shadows. Marcus's eyes softened, regret flickering there. She always said you were different. I thought she was just trying to comfort the failing granddaughter. I smiled faintly. Everyone did, and that was useful. I turned my laptop toward him, pulling up a document I had prepared weeks ago, anticipating this very moment. Your firm isn't dying because of me, Marcus. It's dying because it's outdated. Weak acquisition strategy. Shallow analysis. Clients are bleeding money, and the partners are blind. He frowned, scanning the data. How do you know all this? Because I study everyone, tenants, competitors, potential allies. You never noticed because you never thought I was capable. He looked up sharply. Why show me this? Because I'm offering you a job. The shock on his face was almost comical. A job. You want me to work for you. With me, I corrected, as head of legal for the company. We're expanding, and I need someone who understands contracts inside out. You're smart, Marcus, when your ego isn't clouding your judgment. He blinked, processing, and if I refuse, I close the laptop. Then you drift. Another lawyer scrambling for scraps in a market that's already moved on. You'll be remembered as the brother who lost everything while his sister built an empire. Silence stretched between us. The weight of his pride battled the reality of his situation. Finally, he leaned forward. What's the catch? No catch, I said. But understand this isn't about family, it's business. You'll work like everyone else. You'll earn your place or lose it. I slid a contract across the desk. His hands trembled slightly as he picked it up. His lawyer's instincts kicked in, scanning clauses, tracing figures. The salary's less than I make now. The base salary is, I agreed. But the equity compensation is worth far more. Ownership, Marcus. Not just income. He stared at the page, his defenses crumbling. Then slowly he signed. As he set the pen down, he whispered almost too softly to hear, "I'm sorry, Cassandra, for everything." I studied him, searching for sincerity. "I know," I said quietly. "Now prove it. Build something with me." For the first time, his eyes held no arrogance, only determination. It was a beginning, fragile, uncertain, but real. The late afternoon sun dipped low, casting a warm, golden glow across the cemetery. I carried a bouquet of fresh lilies, my grandmother's favorite, toward her headstone. The marble gleamed in the fading light, the engraved words as steady as the memory of her voice in my mind. I knelt, placing the flowers carefully at the base. "You were right," I whispered, my voice catching. "About everything. About patience, about silence, about letting them think I was nothing while I built everything." The wind rustled through the trees, carrying the faint sound of distant church bells. I sat on the small bench beside her grave, the same one we had shared so many afternoons together. I told her about the company, about the properties, about the office that overlooked the city. I told her about Marcus, how he had fallen, how he had humbled himself, how for the first time he had chosen to stand beside me instead of above me. "You always said he'd come around," I murmured, brushing my fingers across the cool stone. "I never believed you. But maybe you saw something I didn't." My phone buzzed, pulling me from my thoughts. A message from my mother: dinner on Sunday. At your place this time. We'll all be there. I stared at the words for a long moment. For years, family dinners had been moments of quiet humiliation where my failures were dissected and my silence mocked. Now they were asking to sit at my table in my home on my terms. I typed a single reply, "Yes." As the sky deepened into dusk, I rose, brushing off my skirt. The path back to my car felt lighter than it had in years. That night, I stood in my office again, the city lights blazing beneath me. The skyline looked different now, no longer a horizon I gazed at in longing, but a kingdom I had carved with my own hands. I pressed my palms to the glass, feeling the hum of the city vibrate faintly against it. They finally see me, I thought. But then I corrected myself. No, not me. They saw the power, the empire, the undeniable truth of what I had built. Whether they ever saw me, the daughter they had dismissed, was still uncertain. But maybe that didn't matter anymore. Because I knew who I was. I wasn't just Cassandra, the overlooked child. I was the strategist who had turned underestimation into a weapon, silence into an empire. The city glittered beneath me, alive and restless. And somewhere deep in my chest, so was I. "Thank you, grandmother," I whispered to the night, my voice steady and sure, "for teaching me the power of being underestimated." And then I turned away from the glass toward the stack of new contracts waiting on my desk. Deals to close properties, to claim futures, to shape. The family drama could wait. Empires couldn't.